What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Happy opening day. I hope all of you are having a wonderful day so far, and I hope you guys are ready for some baseball. With opening day starting today, I thought it'd be a good idea to make my own tier list and give you guys my personal predictions on how I see each team playing out this season. With me mentioning 30 teams, I'm going to go by them as quickly as possible. I'm not going to stay on one team too long. So without any more interruptions, let's get right into the video. Let's begin with the Dodgers, where I put them as the first team in the 95+ win category. When you have a rotation that consists of Kershaw, Bauer, Buehler, May, Urias, and you're also mixing David Price and Tony Gonsolin in the mix with the bullpen, as well as having names already like Jansen, Trennan, Gratterall, Kelly, and Canley, you are in for some serious business. In the last 2 years, the Dodgers pitching staff has posted the lowest ERA and WHIP, as well as the second lowest FIP and SIERA. And let's not forget about their high-powered offense with names such as Bellinger, Muncy, Betts, and Seager. In the last 2 years, the Dodgers have become the third highest team in OPS, WOBA, and WRC+. They're second in most RBIs, third in most home runs, and first in F4. For the second spot on our list, we're going to put the Yankees in the 95+ win category as well. The Yankees have a lot of potential moving forward, as they have Cole, who's been more than dominant, Kluber, Taillon, Montgomery, and Herman in the rotation, while they have Chapman, Britton, Green, and Loaizaga in the bullpen. However, just like in the past for the last few seasons, the Yankees need to stay healthy, and that's going to be their kryptonite. Kluber himself has been very good for most of his career, and Taillon also has shown flashes of greatness, but again, it all comes back down to the injury factor. For the offense, the Yankees have high-powered offensive machines, such as Judge, Stanton, and LeMahieu. In the last 2 years, the Yankees have posted the highest OPS, WOBA, and the second highest WRC+. The Yankees are first in home runs, RBIs, and third in F4. For the third and final spot on the 95+ win category, I'm going to go ahead and throw the Padres in the mix. The Padres are in the same situation as the Dodgers, where they have an insane rotation consisting of Darvish, Snell, Lamet, Musgrove, Paddock, and Clevenger. The Padres also have a pretty solid cast in the bullpen, and in 2020, the Padres pitching staff was 7th in ERA, 5th in FIP, 3rd in WHIP, 4th in SIERA, and 6th in F4. For the offensive side for the Padres, they have superstars such as Tatis Jr. and Machado. In 2020, the Padres were 4th in OPS, WOBA, and 5th in WRC+. They were 4th in home runs and 3rd in RBIs, and also 2nd in F4. For the first spot on our 85-94 win category, we're going to go ahead and throw the Mets in here. The Mets obviously have a lot of talent on the pitching side of the spectrum with DeGrom, Stroman, and Carrasco, but the thing with the Mets is they're one of those teams in the past that looks really good on paper, but they just don't perform to the expectations that are given to them. For example, in the last 2 years, the Mets rotation was 3rd in F4, but the bullpen was 25th in F4. This is just a small example of many that you could throw out there, but in the last 2 years, the Mets rotation was 3rd in F4, but their bullpen was 25th in F4. I wouldn't be worried about the Mets rotation, as they will be just fine, especially since they added Carrasco to the mix. And the offense has more than enough potential with names like Alonso, Lindor, McNeil, Smith, and Conforto. In the last 2 years, the Mets were 8th in OPS, WOBA, and 5th in WRC+. They were 9th in home runs and 10th in RBIs and 9th in F4. Like I said earlier, the Mets have more than enough offensive talent to get the job done. They look really good on paper, but they don't always come through with how good they look on paper. For the second team I'm going to put in tier 2 is going to be the Braves. The Braves rotation is extremely exciting to look at with names like Fried, Anderson, Morton, and Soroka. In the last 2 years, the Braves pitching staff was 10th in ERA, 14th in FIP, 17th in WHIP, 18th in SIERA, and 18th in F4, but with the rotation that they have, I expect them to perform much better. For the offense, you have names like Freeman, Ozuna, and Acuna Jr. In the last 2 years, the Braves were 5th in OPS, 5th in WOBA, and 6th in WRC+. They were 5th in home runs, 4th in RBIs, and 6th in F4. This next team, a lot of people are not going to like, but I gotta be honest, they're still a great team. They're still gonna be a contending team. I gotta go with the Astros. Although Verlander is out, and that's gonna be a huge blow to their rotation in general, they still have great names like Greinke. They got Odorizzi, which they signed recently, and they also have McCullers Jr. What I'm more concerned with, outside of names like Ryan Presley, is the bullpen and see how they'll be able to hold it together. For the offensive side of the spectrum, regardless, I don't expect the Astros to fall apart. You have names like Altuve, Correa, Bregman, Brantley, and Yordan Alvarez. In the last 2 seasons, the Astros were 2nd in OPS, 2nd in WOBA, and and 1st in WRC+. They were 4th in home runs and 5th in RBIs and 2nd in F4. And for the record, just because of the cheating scandal, I know names like Altuve, Correa, Bregman, and especially guys that weren't involved with the cheating, such as Brantley and Alvarez, they're still going to make a significant impact, and this team is not going to go anywhere. For the next team in the second tier, we're going to go ahead and throw the White Sox in there. If you're a White Sox fan, you should be extremely excited for your future. With names like Giolito, Keuchel, and Lynn, that rotation is going to be more than solid. The White Sox also have the glorious closer Liam Hendriks, they also have Bummer, and they also have Kopech. In the 2020 season, the White Sox pitching staff was 6th in ERA, 10th in FIP, 12th in WHIP, 15th in Sierra, and 11th in F4. For the offensive side of the spectrum, the Sox have Grandel, Abreu, Moncada, Anderson, and much more. In 2020, they were 8th in OPS, 8th in WOBA, and 6th in WRC+. They were also 3rd in home runs, 5th in RBIs, and 1st in F4. For the next team in the second tier, we're going to go ahead and throw the Twins in there, which are going to be battling closely with the White Sox in the AL Central. The Twins have more than a solid rotation consisting of Maeda, Berrios, Pineda, and Dobnak. The Twins also have a solid bullpen consisting of names like Rogers and Duffy. And in the last 2 seasons, the Twins pitching staff was 7th in ERA, 4th in FIP, 9th in WHIP, 8th in Sierra, and 1st in F4. The Twins also have a mighty fine offense consisting of names such as Donaldson, Buxton, Kepler, and Cruz. In the last 2 seasons, the Twins offense has been 4th in OPS, 4th in WOBA, and 4th in WRC+. They were also 2nd in home runs, 3rd in RBIs, and 4th in F4. The next team we're going to go ahead and throw in the tier 2 list is the Rays. The Rays have a very, very good pitching staff consisting of names such as Glasnow, Yarbrough, Fairbanks, Castillo, Rowe, and Anderson. In the last 2 seasons, the Rays pitching staff has absolutely dominated the league, where they were 2nd in ERA, 1st in FIP, 3rd in WHIP, 1st in Sierra, and 4th in F4. Now here's the very interesting thing about the Rays is their offense. Obviously they have the postseason warrior, Rosarina, and other solid players such as Lowe, Adames, and Meadows. And the Rays offense has been nowhere near terrible as they were 10th in F4 in the last 2 seasons, but when you lose important starting pitchers such as Snell and Morton, you're putting yourself at a massive disadvantage. And I say that because the Rays are one of those teams that doesn't score a lot of runs, they just beat you in low-scoring affairs. For the next team in Tier 2 is a very interesting team, and that team is the Blue Jays. Well, it's because I don't really trust their starting rotation, and I definitely do not trust their bullpen, but they have a very promising future as far as their offense is concerned. When you have young talents such as Guerrero Jr., Biggio, Bichette, and you also add players like Simeon and Springer, it's only a matter of time before that offense absolutely explodes. The kicker is the Blue Jays pitching staff, and will they be able to perform well moving forward? In the last 2 years, the Blue Jays were 20th in ERA, 23rd in FIP, 25th in WHIP, Sierra, and 25th in F4. The Blue Jays really need to bolster their starting rotation, and they especially need to bolster their bullpen, as I don't expect, even as good as the Blue Jays offense can be, to score that many runs every single game and be able to win consistently day in and day out. And for the final team in Tier 2, we're going to throw Cleveland in. Cleveland's rotation is very good still. They have Bieber, they have Savall, they have Plesac, and they also have McKenzie, who has a lot of potential moving forward. They also have very good relievers such as Karinchak, and in the last 2 seasons, they were 3rd in ERA, FIP, 4th in WHIP, Sierra, and 2nd in F4. Now the kicker for the Indians is they lost Carrasco, they lost Lindor, and they also lost Santana. I don't expect them to make as significant of an impact as they usually do because of the loss in these big names, but they still do have Ramirez, and they also added Rosario. Now Rosario is no Lindor, but I think he's more than a solid player and he has the potential to help the team out. And Cleveland reminds me a lot of the Rays, and that's because I really like their rotation, I really like their bullpen, but I'm not really too high end on their offense outside of Ramirez. In the last 2 years, they were 20th in OPS, 19th in WOBA, and 21st in WRC+. They were 22nd in home runs, 21st in RBIs, and 16th in F4. Now on to Tier 3, where the first team we're going to put in the mix is the Nationals. Obviously, the Nationals have a very solid starting rotation consisting of Scherzer, Strasburg, and Corbin, and they also have some pretty solid relievers such as Hudson. The Nationals also added Harris and Han, which will help out their bullpen tremendously, and the Nationals are going to need every bit of help that they can get in their bullpen, because their bullpen was absolutely terrible in the last 2 years, where they were 29th in ERA, 24th in FIP, 27th in WHIP, 24th in Sierra, and 26th in F4. The Nationals also have a very solid offense with names like Soto. They added Bell. They also have the underrated man himself known as Turner, and they also have Zimmerman. Obviously, the Nationals did lose Rendon, but with the additions to the bullpen, I still think the Nationals are going to be a pretty solid organization. For the next team in the third tier, I added the Red Sox. Now, what I would really be concerned with as a Red Sox fan is the fact that in the last 2 years, they have blown more saves than any other team in the league. And in the last 2 years, their pitching staff was 22nd in ERA, 16th in FIP, 26th in WHIP, 12th in Sierra, and 17th in F4. Some of those numbers aren't absolutely terrible, but the most blown saves in the league isn't exactly good, and also with Chris Sale being on the IL doesn't help them at all. Still, the Red Sox have a pretty solid offense with names like Devers, Bogarts, and Martinez. In the last 2 years, the Red Sox were 6th in OPS, 6th in WOBA, and 7th in WRC+. They were also 10th in home runs, 6th in RBIs, and 7th in F4. For the next team in the third tier, I had to put the Phillies in. The Phillies have one of the most underrated starting pitchers in the league, which would be Aaron Nola, and they also have Zach Wheeler. They completely revamped their bullpen and have names like Bradley to back up the bullpen, and they're going to need that, because in the last 2 seasons, the Phillies were 25th in ERA, 26th in FIP, 28th in WHIP, 15th in Sierra, and 27th in F4. The Phillies' offensive lineup is also pretty solid with names like Real Muto, Harper, Hoskins, and McCutcheon. In the last 2 years, the Phillies were 13th in OPS, 13th in WOBA, and 14th in WRC+. They were 18th in home runs, 13th in RBIs, and 14th in F4. For the next team in the third tier, I had to go with the Brewers. The Brewers have a very, very exciting starting rotation consisting of Woodruff and Burns. They also have more than dominant relievers with Hader and the young Williams. In 2020, the Brewers pitching staff was 11th in ERA, 4th in FIP, 9th in WHIP, 2nd in Sierra, and 4th in F4. The Brewers also have some solid names in their offensive lineup, adding names like Wong to the mix, and they also have Yelich and Kane. In the last 2 years, the Brewers were 14th in OPS, 15th in WOBA, and 16th in WRC+. They were 11th in home runs, 17th in RBIs, and 13th in F4. For the next team in the third tier, I had to go with the Cardinals. Now, I think the Brewers, the Cardinals, and the Cubs are going to all be battling for that #1 spot in the NL Central very closely. The Cardinals have a very, very good #1 with Flaherty, and they also have Wainwright, who's been there for a very long time. Their bullpen is pretty solid with Gallegos, Gant, Miller, and Hicks, but they're also going to miss Mikolas and Hudson on the IL to start the season. In the last 2 years, the Cardinals pitching staff was 5th in ERA, 12th in FIP, 7th in WHIP, 15th in Sierra, and 14th in F4. For the offense, they have names like Goldschmidt, DeYoung, and Arenado. When you add a name like Arenado, your team gets significantly better overnight. Still, it will be very interesting to see how Arenado adjusts from Coors Field to Busch Stadium. For the next team in the third tier, I have to go with the Cubs. Now, they did lose Darvish, which is less than ideal, but they still have Hendricks, and they also added Arrieta, even though he's not what he used to be. They still have Kimbrel, who is a former shell of himself, but not outright terrible, and they also have Workman. And I also wouldn't say that they were terrible, as in the last 2 years, the pitching staff for the Cubs was 8th in ERA, 9th in FIP, 11th in WHIP, 11th in Sierra, and 12th in F4. Now, where it gets really interesting is the fact that they do have Rizzo, Bryant, Contreras, Baez, Happ, and Peterson. Now, Peterson absolutely tore it up in spring training and had one of the best numbers in spring training out of all the players in the league. Obviously, I'm also happy that Happ is getting plenty of opportunities and he's proving his worth to the team. But where they're going to run into problems is in 2022 when Rizzo, Bryant, and Baez are all free agents. The Cubs offense in the last 2 years was 10th in OPS, 9th in WOBA, and 12th in WRC+. They were 7th in home runs, 12th in RBIs, and 8th in F4. For the next team in the third tier is the Angels. Now, the Angels I have a love-hate relationship with because I love Mike Trout and I'm tired of him not getting any help. But I think the Angels are finally somewhat starting to listen to people's calls, at least as far as the bullpen is concerned. Lately, they added Iglesias, Cechek, and Watson. However, the starting rotation is still a fat question mark. The Angels rotation consists of names like Bundy, Heaney, and Ohtani, and although Ohtani is very good offensively, his spring wasn't that great, and I'm just not sure if he can hit and pitch consistently. Not to mention, the Angels' rotation in the last 2 years was last in F4. which is far from good. The offense on the other side of the spectrum, which you have Mike Trout, the best player in the world, and you also have names like Anthony Rendon and Ohtani. In the last 2 years, this team was 15th in OPS, 14th in WOBA, and 11th in WRC+. They were 14th in home runs, 14th in RBIs, and 17th in F4. For the next team in the third tier, I'm going to go ahead and put the Athletics in. With names like Montez, Manaya, and Fires, they have a pretty solid rotation. They also added Rosenthal to the bullpen, and they have names like Romo. In the last 2 years, the Athletics were 7th in F4 and 6th in ERA. The Athletics also have some of the best defenders in the league with Matt Chapman and Matt Olson. They also happen to be very good hitters, and the Oakland Athletics offense in general in the last 2 years was 11th in OPS, 10th in WOBA, and 8th in WRC+. They were also 8th in home runs, 9th in RBIs, and 5th in F4. The next team to go into Tier 3 is the Reds. They did lose Bauer, which isn't going to help their case, but they still have Gray and Castillo. They also have some solid relievers in the bullpen, consisting of Doolittle, Garrett, and Lorenzen. In the last 2 years, the Reds pitching staff was 9th in ERA, 7th in FIP, 6th in WHIP, 5th in Sierra, and 6th in F4. They also have a pretty solid offensive lineup with Moustakas, Suarez, and Castellanos. Votto will unfortunately be on the IL for the Reds, which will hurt them in some ways. And in the last 2 years, the Reds were 22nd in OPS, 22nd in WOBA, and 24th in WRC+. They were also 12th in home runs and 27th in RBIs, as well as 24th in F4. So I think it's pretty easy to say that although they do have some solid people in their offensive lineup, they simply need to score more runs. For the next team in the third tier, we're going to go ahead and put the Giants in the mix. Now, I'm not too high on the Giants rotation, and I'm also not that high on the bullpen, as in the last 2 years, the pitching staff in general was 22nd in F4. And for the offense, I'm also not too high on them outside of Posey, Solano, and Yastrzemski, who both Solano and Yastrzemski had very good 2020 seasons, and I only expect them to get better. But the reason why I say I'm also not high on their offense is because in the last 2 years, the Giants were 26th in OPS, 26th in WOBA, and 23rd in WRC+. They were also 26th in home runs, 25th in RBIs, and 21st in F4. And for the last and final team on Tier 3, I have to throw in the Diamondbacks. Now the Diamondbacks, I will say, stacked up on relievers, but they didn't go after a big name, and also I'm still very skeptical on their starting rotation. Obviously they went out and got Bumgarner for the 2020 season, and you can only take the 2020 season with a grain of salt, but Bumgarner really was not that great. However, I do like a lot of the offensive production. I do really like Ahmed, I like Peralta, and I also like Marte. In the last 2 years, the Diamondbacks were 16th in OPS, 17th in WOBA, and 22nd in WRC+. They were also 23rd in home runs, 11th in RBIs, and 15th in F4. Now we're starting to get to the territory where teams just aren't playing that great of baseball. For the first team in the fourth tier, I have to go with the Royals. Now I'm really just not that confident in the Royals starting rotation, and I'm also not as confident in their bullpen, but they did make some pretty cool signings. They added Benintendi, and they also added Alberto. They re-signed Dozier and Perez, and last but not least, I think they have one of the most underrated players in the league, which is Merrifield, and they also have Soler. But I don't think this is going to be enough or anywhere near enough for them to push for a playoff spot because of their rotation and also because of their bullpen. Now, as far as the offense is concerned for the Royals, in the last 2 years, for the most part, in most of the big major statistics, they were in the bottom portions for. For the next team in the fourth tier, we're going to go ahead and put the Marlins in the mix. Now, the Marlins are a very interesting team. I don't like their bullpen at all. In the last 2 years, the Marlins bullpen was last in F4 and last in Sierra, as well as last in FIP. But their starting rotation has a lot to look forward to, and they have a lot of promise, with names like Alcantara, Lopez, and also Sanchez. But unfortunately for Sixto, well, let's just say surface manipulation sucks. Just like the bullpen, I'm not that high on the offense, although I do think a name like Starlin Marte will help them quite a bit. But the reason I'm still not that high on them is because in the last 2 years, the Marlins were last in OPS, they were last in home runs, and they were 29th in F4. For the next team in the fourth tier, and I know if my former history professor is watching this from high school, he's gonna hate me for the rest of his life, but I gotta put in the Mariners. There are certain aspects of the Mariners that I do like. For example, I love Paxton. I've always been a huge supporter of him, especially when he was with the Yankees, as I'm a huge Yankee supporter and fan. And I also do like the potential in Sheffield, as I think Sheffield made a lot of great strides in 2020. I also do give the Mariners credit for bolstering their bullpen with Ken Giles. But the thing that I really just do not like and turns me off about the Mariners is that in the last 2 years, their pitching staff was 24th in ERA, 28th in FIP, 20th in WHIP, 26th in Sierra, and 28th in F4. I'm also not that high end on their offense, although I do like names like Tom Murphy and Kyle Lewis. In the last 2 years, the Mariners were 25th in OPS, 24th in WOBA, and 15th in WRC+. They were 15th in home runs, 18th in RBIs, and 20th in F4. For the next team in the 4th tier, I gotta go with the Rockies. If it wasn't for the fact that Trevor Story exists and somewhat Charlie Blackmon, I really don't think I'd have any interest in watching the Rockies, especially since Nolan Arenado is no longer on the Rockies. Their starting rotation is very skeptical, and I also am not too high on their bullpen either. In the last 2 years, the Rockies pitching staff was last in ERA, 29th in FIP, last in WHIP, last in Sierra, and 29th in F4. What I think is really interesting about the Rockies, and it supports my Chapman versus Arenado debate very well, is the fact that in the last 2 years, the Rockies were 9th in OPS, 11th in WOBA, but 28th in WRC+. And for the final and last team in Tier 4, I'm gonna go with the Rangers. The Rangers pretty much have no starting rotation, and I'm also not that high on their bullpen either. In the last 2 years, the Rangers pitching staff was 26th in ERA, 24th in FIP, 27th in WHIP, 24th in Sierra, and 16th in F4. Just like the Rockies, I do not watch the Rangers for their pitching, but instead I watch them for their offense. I'm a really big, firm believer in Joey Gallo. I also do like Chris Davis, although it seems like he's kind of fallen off a mountain lately, and I do have a lot of faith in Willie Calhoun. The Rangers' offensive metrics in the last 2 years haven't been that great, as they've been 24th in OPS, 25th in WOBA, and 27th in WRC+. And now for the 5th tier, the place where teams go to die and the place where you just see really, really bad baseball, I gotta go with the Orioles. I really do like John Means, but what are you going to do when pretty much all of your starting rotation is John Means? I do like Tanner Scott and Cesar Valdez, but outside of those two, it's just another situation with John Means. What else do you have in the bullpen that's going to be reliable for you? In the last 2 years, the Orioles pitching staff was 29th in ERA, last in FIP, 23rd in WHIP, 28th in Sierra, and 26th in F4. The offense really isn't much better, as in the last 2 years, the Orioles were 21st in OPS, 23rd in WOBA, and 20th in WRC+. I definitely don't think the Orioles offense is anywhere near compared to the dumpster fire that the pitching staff is, but it's definitely not good enough for them to win a lot of baseball games. However, I'm excited for Trey Mancini. I really like Trey Mancini. I think he's a pretty solid player, and I'm so happy that he was able to kick cancer to the curb. For the next team in the last tier, I have to go with the Tigers. Again, it's another John Means situation, although I think John Means is better. Their bullpen is also still very questionable, and in the last 2 years, the Tigers pitching staff was 28th in ERA, 26th in FIP, 29th in WHIP, 22nd in Sierra, and 21st in F4. The offense consists of names like Cabrera, Goodrum, and Schoop. However, just like the pitching staff, the offense just hasn't been there, and in the last 2 seasons, they've been 29th in OPS, last in WOBA, and last in WRC+. And last, but certainly not least, and I say that very lightly, is the Pirates. Honestly, Pirates fans deserve significantly better than what they've been given. The rotation is a mess, the bullpen's a mess, I don't like what they've done recently. I also don't like the fact that they gave up on elite level and great solid talents such as Meadows, Cole, Glasnow, and many others. But I also have to mention that Frazier and Newman, especially Newman, had really, really good springs. However, I don't really know how much that's going to contribute in the regular season, and the Pirates in general just have not been that good offensively. In the last 2 years, the Pirates are 27th in OPS, 27th in WOBA, and 25th in WRC+. That is about it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope all of you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you do leave a like, comment down below on what I can do better, or what you disagree or agree with. Also subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys later.